We are on our way to check out a couple of Thok bikes. Thok bikes have been around for a few years, but they have only just been released into the wild in Norway. So we are heading for the woods to see if we can find any. Welcome to EMTB videos. Thok Bikes has now got a Norwegian distributor, or should I say agent. They will offer local support for the direct sales Thok brand. And they've got demo bikes, so we finally get to ride a Thok. I guess many of you have heard about Thok bikes before. The old Thok MIG got a bit of attention, and the Thok MIG lives on. But we are here to have a look at the new TK01. It looks so normal and nice, much more conventional than the MIG. The biggest deal about this bike would have to be the price. It's 4,160 euros for a 170mm travel EMTB with the big 630 watt-hours Shimano battery and the new EP8 motor. And it's got the RockShox Yari fork, not the cheaper 35 Gold RL that is usually found at this price point. In Norway at least, the price is good. And as far as I understand, this is among the first bikes that can be delivered with the Shimano EP8 motor. With 170mm of suspension travel, we expect this to be a burly bike. The generous wheelbase of 1265mm and the 64.5 degree head angle confirms this. The bottom bracket sits relatively high at 355mm. The TK01 is a mullet bike, with a 29er wheel up front and 27.5 at the back, both running Maxxis Assegai 2.6 inches wide tires. Rubber is Maxterra 3C XO Plus. Even though it's got a smaller rear wheel, the chainstay length of 453mm isn't that short, and that's okay for a gravity-oriented bike. We started our test ride climbing a gravel road, and the Thok felt like any other EMTB of course. And as we hit the wet and rocky trails, it still climbed as well as any EMTB. We see this every time. As long as you've got a bit of ground clearance and the chainstays aren't super short, pretty much every EMTB with a good motor is a great climber. We were hitting short, almost vertical ledges at some speed, and the bikes were almost flying up and over them. And we were climbing some steep and slippery rocks too. The flat and winding trails can be more of a challenge for a burly, long travel bike. But the TK01 felt alright on such trails too. It wasn't too much job turning from side to side. It felt like the regular 150 to 160mm travel EMTBs. We've got no complaints when riding less aggressively at lower speeds. But for the burly TK01, it's of course the descents that is the most interesting part. Let's start with a couple of negatives. A slack, long travel EMTB will perhaps need a better shock. Don't get me wrong, the RockShox Deluxe R is a decent shock. But we would prefer the Super Deluxe with the piggyback chamber for riding hard on prolonged descents. We didn't have any issues with it during the test ride though, so this might not be an issue for you. And we are asking a lot, considering the price. The Deluxe shock will take quite a bit of speed before it gets overwhelmed. And then there's the brakes. Judging by the specs, it seems Thok wants to stick with SRAM components. So I guess the dual caliper SRAM Guide T is the obvious choice. But they were holding us back a bit. We struggled with arm pump towards the end of the final descent. So Thok should consider something like the Shimano MT520 brakes instead. And that's all the negative we've got to say about the TK01. It was a great descender, and although it was a fairly lively bike on the flat trails, it stepped it up quite a bit going down. We were gliding comfortably over rocky surfaces, and the bike handled easily through the turns. The Thok TK01 sure is a pleasant bike in challenging terrain, regardless of the angle. And in our market, it's a seriously contender with that highly competitive price tag.